Please be aware that in this episode, Simon and Cory have a discussion about suicide. Check the show notes below for the time code.
I was sitting there and I ended up just sobbing and screaming into my sleeping bag at the top of my lungs because I didn't want the camp staff to hear what was happening. I walked into the cook tent and I was like, I'm done. And they're like, with the expedition? And I was like, no, I'm like done climbing and taking pictures.
In the last episode of A Bit of Optimism, I sat down with Cory Richards. He's the climber and photographer whose selfie after he survived an avalanche made it to the cover of National Geographic. His journey is nothing short of extraordinary. And as powerful as our first episode was, our conversation went even deeper. Cory's story is not just about surviving the mountains. It's about confronting the personal battles that follow, the moments of clarity and chaos that shape who we all are. This is A Bit of Optimism.
Our minds do this thing called splitting. When we feel under threat, we get more binary, which you see proliferating in extreme ways across America.
And for good reason, by the way. There's no time for nuance when there's a threat.
Right.
Am I going to get eaten or am I not going to get eaten?
But there is time for critical thinking.
Right.
To be able to slow yourself down and move into a response mindset. And this is, this is something I actually speak about, is this whole system is something I came up with largely because I was so heartbroken that I was like, how the fuck do I get through this? And so basically, if you can master the skill of slowing yourself down, which comes down to learning how to self-regulate, you can make that shift really quickly.
From binary to critical.
From binary to critical, out of sympathetic into parasympathetic.
It reminds me of pilots.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've ever heard air traffic control tapes of a really bad emergency on an aircraft, to me, the most extreme one is a very famous plane crash back in Sioux Falls or Sioux City. I can't remember. But basically, the plane's full on fire. Yeah. The engines are on fire. The plane's on fire. Yeah. They've lost hydraulics, which is literally the worst thing that can happen. Yeah. And they're controlling the plane with the engines, left and right with thrust, right? And there's video footage of it, of the plane coming in for a landing on fire. And it crash lands, it somersaults, and miraculously half the people survived, including the pilot. But when you go listen to the air traffic control chatter, it's like, we're on fire right now. Gonna make a emergency landing, Yeah. And you can hear the tension in their voice, but they're calm and they're thinking, and they saved the lives of many because they could think critically. And it's everything you're saying. Yeah. Which is, in time of tension, they go calm, they self-regulate, they think about the problem. Yeah. And they have options as opposed to, black and white and panic.
Right. The key component, I think, of resilience that is the jumping off point, and goes back to my dad, is agency. Yeah. Because if you're looking at, why did this happen? This happened to me. If you're in a place of victimhood, or if you're in a place of blame, you are quite literally backwards looking. There's no forward focus there.
This happened to me.
This happened to me, not this is the current situation. Right. I can go to my therapist and figure out.
There's a time and place for that.
There's a time and place for that. But in those critical moments, it's about taking agency of the situation. We saw it with the fires. 9 of my friends, overnight, homeless. They're my whole core men's community. They all lived in the Palisades. And it's a natural response. When we are in threat, when we are in pain, we naturally look for places to put blame.
Of course.
Right?
It helps us feel better.
It helps us feel better.
Sure.
It's a outsourcing of pain. The friends who did that recovered far less,
they didn't recover.
They didn't recover as well as the ones who basically said,
it happened.
My house burned down. Now what do? I can figure out the fire hydrants and the reservoirs later. Right now, I need to slow it down to speed up. Slow is fast. And that is a resilience mindset. There is an element of survival mode, but you're not outsourcing it.
So go back to your model. It starts with self-regulation.
It starts with agency. Yes, self-regulation, but So basically, the sort of 4 key components are agency is everything. So taking ownership over the situation.
Which is the opposite of victimization.
100%. Agency is everything. Discovery demands discomfort, meaning you have to lean in to the discomfort of the situation and not try to escape it. And they all work hand in hand. The third is certainty kills curiosity, meaning as soon as you're certain about something, growth is done, right? And then, adaptation leads to evolution, which is about not trying to remake something, but trying to reimagine something from the ground up. You can take pieces from the past so long as you're not married to it, but you can't remake the past. You just can't functionally.
Can you give me a specific story that you have gone through where you were able to apply those 4 elements and manage through something that you may have not have been able to in the past before you were able to have such clarity?
It's a beautiful question because it leads to this moment right here. In 2021, height of COVID, I had been training for a new route on Everest to climb something that had never been climbed before by anybody, do it without oxygen. And we had tried in 2019 and failed, or not gotten to the top. We can get back to failure because I don't believe in it. In the history of the universe, not one single thing has ever failed.
Yeah. We'll get back to that.
Yeah, we'll get back to that. So it's 2021 and the Everest season from the north side, which is where we were climbing from, the Tibetan side, gets canceled. And so we have all this money saved. We're making a film about my dying father and this climb and mental health. And we decide to go to a mountain called Dhaulagiri, which is the 7th highest mountain in the world. It's sort of like a dry run. And we ended up at base camp, and I had not been sleeping well. I had not been eating a lot. I was very emotional. I was teary. We flew to base camp in a helicopter. So we jumped elevations really quick. And then we exerted ourselves for 3 days trying to build a base camp.
Because there's no infrastructure there.
There's no infrastructure there, especially that time of year, those seasons. Again, we were trying a new route. So there's this hyper stress going on. And the team went out to sort of recon a way onto the face. Nobody had ever climbed it. And I stayed in my tent, and my brain started to speed up. And I started to cry uncontrollably. I was trying to read, but I really couldn't make sense of the words. I was reading, I think, Autobiography of a Yogi or something like that. And all I kept coming back to was this word love, love, love. But then it was countered by this idea of like sort of grandiosity and dying. I couldn't make sense of it. Later on, it would be, I think, reasonably diagnosed as a very extreme mixed bipolar episode, which is where you're experiencing crushing depression and hypomania, in my case, all at the same time. So it's incredibly hard. Anyway, I was sitting there and I ended up just sobbing and screaming into my sleeping bag at the top of my lungs because I didn't want the camp staff to hear what was happening. Team came back, and I walked into the cook tent and I was like, I'm done. And they're like, what do you mean you're done? And I was like, I'm done. And they're like, with the expedition? I mean, dude, hundreds of thousands of dollars, sponsors, like all of it. And I was like, no, I'm like done climbing and taking pictures. And they're, kind of jaws dropped. I'm crying, sobbing at the time. And they're like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, move to LA and make movies. So there was this amplified grandiosity going on. Next day I get up, I leave, I walk down the valley, I get on a helicopter, I fly back to Kathmandu, I get on a plane, I fly home. And now I'm getting really depressed. There's a sense of freedom in it. I'm like, oh, I freed myself from this, whatever it was. But I get home and then I get this email. My mom texted me really early in the morning and she said, did you get the email from Tommy, who was part of the team? And it was just this scathing interpretation of what had happened, vast manipulation, hiding behind mental health, like all of these things. And I was so depressed at the time. I was like, well, fuck it. I'll just kill myself. Like, I'm done. Peace out. And it wasn't the first time I had that thought in my life. And so I prepared myself and did all, I took a shower and pulled out a climbing rope and tied a noose and hung it from the ceiling and got up on the stool. And I almost accidentally did it. And anyway, I ended up obviously not dying and reaching out for help and really dove in very deep into the mental health world. I knew all the words, I knew all the ideas by that point, but I had contextualized it. People who think a lot do that. And they think that the knowledge is the healing, and the healing isn't the knowledge at all. It's like wisdom can't be taught, but knowledge can. Wisdom is the embodiment. And then I didn't know what I was going to do. I had built this identity as a photographer and as a climber and National Geographic this and blah, 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 blah. And now none of those things existed. And there was this stark reality and a very deep probing of who am I as a human being if I don't have these anchors and my value can no longer be tied to an external expression. What does that mean for my humanity? And so now you see like taking agency over the situation. What is the truth? The truth is not
who am I, not who do others think I am.
Exactly. Like, and here's the reality. I now am stepping into an unknown future. Then you get into this, like, I'm not climbing anymore. I'm not taking photographs. I'm not working for National Geographic. None of these things. So now here I am. These are the hurdles that are impacting me, that are from my past. I need to take care of those. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have limitless money. How am I going to sort this out? Boom, you've got agency. Then you move into discovery demands endurance. That is a very uncomfortable place to be. You've got financial stresses. You've got long-term sort of, life path stresses. You've got identity stresses. And I'm sitting there going, this is the most uncomfortable I've ever been. During that time, I went through a very, very toxic and also formative, beautiful relationship where, I was dating this gal, and again, if you really look at it, I had anchored myself to her beauty. I just thought she was the most beautiful thing in the world. And maybe if I'm standing next to her, that can make up for all the other things that I've let go, and then we moved to Thailand. And then I come to find out that she had actually been, and I write about it in the book, so I feel square talking about this she knows. She approved the chapter, but come to find out that she had been escorting during our relationship. And so now there's this heartbreak involved in this now too. And that is a deeply uncomfortable place. So there's loss, there's heartbreak, and I just had to sit in it. And I just had to sit in it and explore it. Then you get to, well, let's get curious about this. What are the stories that I'm telling? Where is my certainty in this? And are those certainties true? And what stories are those certainties driving that are anchoring me in beliefs?
What is my story? Is that story true?
Exactly.
Is that story really true?
Is that story and if it's not true, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So now you're in curiosity versus certainty. And out of that came the book and the books, because it was the mining of all of this that led me to writing what became the first book. And so, and that starts to be an adaptation, right? What's interesting is, and I've said this before, I did not start writing that book from a place of service at all. Mm-hmm. I actually started writing from a place of victimhood. Look at all the things that happened to me. And that went back to the curiosity part where I'm like, wait a minute. Like the story with my brother. He did all these things. Well, wait a minute. Was it just him? Or were you getting something from this? And as soon as I started asking those questions and being willing to write them out, despite all the discomfort, I started discovering that there was a deeper truth to all of this that allowed me to take more and more and more agency, which allowed me to expand the discomfort, which allowed me to be more curious. And then the words start coming out, and it transformed the book from a sob story into an act of service that says, this is my life. You've seen it from this side. Now, let me tell you what's going on underneath.
And I hope the lessons I've learned are valuable to you so you don't have to go through what I've gone through.
Even if we don't know each other, you are not alone.
You're not the first person to go through this.
You're not the first person. It doesn't mean it's not unique and special to you. It feels like it's the only thing.
Yeah.
But I just want you to know.
It turns a vicious cycle into a virtuous one.
Exactly. And so just really recently, all of this solidified. It's where I was like, oh, it was really about the discovery of values, which came through my men's work, because it was like, people are like, oh, you've been so resilient in your life. And I'm like, I was living in survival, which is why I was doing all of the things that were so dark behind the surface. I was just grabbing for candy, you know?
Okay, so that's where you learned it.
Yeah, that's where I learned it.
Tell me an experience where you were able to apply it consciously. You're like, okay, I've got these 4 things. I'm going to do it. Or is it not like that?
No,
it sounds prescriptive.
This is where it gets back to us right now. It's 2025. I was in Hawaii with now my ex-partner for the holidays. We get a call from my mom. She says, Dad has an internal bleed. He's been sick for 5 years. You need to come home. It's happening. So we get on a plane we land on New Year's Eve. I go see my dad. He bounces back, but it's like, okay, this is coming. We come home on the 6th. The fires happen on the 7th. My entire community gets thrust into triage mode, which amplifies everybody's nervous system. My ex and I break up. She's my best friend at the time. I mean, this is very recent, by the way. This is why I'm like, give me some whiskey. My ex and I break up, and she's been my best friend for over a year. So the thing goes away. Not by design. It was not in any way overlapping, but there was a woman that came into my life basically at that exact same moment. And it was the first time in my life that I had a deep internal knowing. I was like, this is the thing that people talk about. It was like I felt something in my gut, in my body that knew. It was like I had found my mirror. I'd found the person. Mom calls again. Now you really got to come home. I get on a plane. She calls on Saturday morning. I get on a plane in the afternoon. I arrive, and Dad is definitely dying. My brother, who I hadn't seen, I think, 4 years, shows up. It's totally amicable. We're here in this together. We sit on my dad's bed that night with my cousin and his wife, and we were giving my dad drawing the syringe, little shots of Jameson, sort of in between his moments of lucidity, and we were all just laughing and telling stories. And the next day we had a conversation just about, hey, how long is this going to last? And the hospice people just said, hey, just make him comfortable, make him comfortable. And that night it was clear that he was dying. And, we were all exhausted. I went to lie down for a little bit, and my mom went to take out the recycling or something. And when everybody was out of the room, he died. And I'm still very much processing that. And then this gal that I was so deeply falling in love with, truly falling in love in a way that I've never imagined is even possible. And she said, she was like, look, I'm still talking to some other people. And I said, okay, I can handle that. I'm not, all I need is communication. And she was going out of town, and I knew she was going to go on a date. And I said, just look, this is going to be hard for me, but please just communicate. And she didn't text or communicate for 9 or 10 days. And then when we finally communicated again, it was, I'm going to pursue this other thing. And then the totality of everything kind of crashed into me. The fires as a backdrop. Even though the relationship needed to end, she was still my best friend. It wasn't bad. Dad dies. The rocket ship of love and the fall to earth of heartbreak. And I was sitting there on an airplane going, any one of these events is life altering. And I'm trying to juggle 4 at the same time. Every day I wake up now and I try to take agency. What do I really know? I know my dad's dead. I know it hurts. I know I tasted something so sweet, but that's not here anymore for now. Maybe it comes back. Maybe it doesn't. It doesn't even matter. So I take agency and I sit in the place of discomfort every day. Today's been a terrible one. Terrible. Sometimes I sit in my car and I scream as loud as I fucking can and just cry because it just hurts so fucking much. So I'm in the place of just profound discomfort. And every day, as I start to make up new stories about my lack of value or why she left or what the other guy has or whatever it is or what my ex is doing now or how I've whatever. Anytime I start to come up with a story, it's like there's an elbow block of something so deep in me that says, you're trying to create certainty, which is a grasp for comfort, which you know is not what you need because it will erase your agency. You're giving all the power away. And so there's the deep curiosity of, well, now what? Now what? And I don't know what the adaptation is. But I know that if I stick to my values, I stay in my integrity, I watch the crutches, I know that what's on the other side of this is profound. And this conversation, in some small or large way, is the adaptation or a piece of it that will lead to the evolution. Anyway.
Thanks for sharing.
Jesus. It's just so, man, it hurts. But the whiskey's good.
Who's sitting with you in this, through this?
Well, right now you are. And this is, I think, obviously this is a more curated environment, but when people sit and don't try to change it and they just allow you to be sad without silver lining it, without at least this, at least they just sit and they say, that's gotta hurt. Those people are the most valuable. They're not trying to change it. When you try to change somebody's pain, you are rejecting it. And so I have this group of men here that I have great female friends too, but this group of men, treehouse, we talk every day. And
so you have that.
I have that. Yeah. Doesn't mean it hurts less.
Yeah.
It's just, I know that I have a foundational group of people that will always show up.
The part that needs to be underlined here is that group.
Totally.
As I said about the story from Johnny Quest, which is, he said, I'm with you.
Yeah.
And then I had the strength to keep going.
Right.
Because it's definitely not internal fortitude. I'd already decided I was quitting.
Right.
And you're not looking for anybody to fix anything. You said it's agency.
Yeah.
You're not looking for anybody to convince you that everything's fine. Everything's not fine.
Mm-mm.
And what you're going through is awful. And this is where I think agency is so fascinating, or the ability to be okay with discomfort and all your 4 things. The question I would raise is, does any of us have the internal fortitude to do any of those 4 things alone? Or the only reason you can do those 4 things is because you have a person or a network that when you say, this is what's happening to me, they simply say to you, yeah, that sucks, and validate the way you feel so that you have the strength of feeling not alone in taking agency, sitting in discomfort, being curious.
Yeah.
I wonder if the foundation of all those 4 things is the love that people have of you. When you almost ended it,
mm-hmm.
Who did you call?
At that moment, I called my then therapist, now friend, dear friend, and I just said, help. Just help. I don't know what to do. And then my friend Lori came over, and I remember I was in my underwear. I was just laying on the floor, and she just laid down on top of me and put her head on the small of my back. I remember very distinctly first feeling her hair, and then feeling that kind of like stickiness because I knew she was crying.
Yeah. The salt on salt.
The salt on, yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember she just said, don't go. And, in this situation now, it's never been, I haven't gotten to that place because I have this incredible group of people that exemplifies and amplifies love and support. And they can't do anything. They can't do funcally anything aside
They can't bring your dad back. They can't bring the girl back. There's nothing to solve.
There's nothing to solve.
Yeah.
And so I think your question is, that is something that I would say I am certain of, is that we can do fantastic things alone. And ultimately the road that you take is your own. You have to do the work. You have to do the steps. But those steps are made possible by the community we keep.
There's an irony in all of your story. There's a deep irony in all of it, which is the glory, the individual glory that comes with climbing a mountain and taking a picture from the top. And yet somebody else took the picture of you, or somebody else prepped your climbing gear, or somebody else helped get you the sponsor, and this team of people so that one person can have glory. And it's the same with those Olympic medalists, which is they stand on the podium with the gold medal and say, look what I did. And yet the scores of relationships and friends and family and coaches and nutritionists who devoted their lives so that this one person could achieve their dream.
Yeah.
And I think the selfishness, what I'm learning, the selfishness is not the desire to climb the mountain and win the gold medal. That's not the selfishness. The selfishness is standing on the top of the mountain or standing on the podium with the gold medal and not saying thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the lack of acknowledgement.
It's the lack of gratitude.
Yeah.
Is the selfishness. It's not the drive or the accomplishment or the desire to conquer. All of that I'm realizing is fine.
Yeah.
It's that you stupidly thought you did it alone.
Well, it's easy to erase it at that time.
Look what I did.
Look what I did.
Look who I am.
Yeah. Validate me.
Validate me. Tell me how beautiful I am. And your friend came over and laid on top of you and did the most beautiful thing any human being could do for another human being, make them feel not alone.
Yeah.
And it literally saved your life.
And it saved my life. These multiple things exist at once, right? Like my mom puts me in the hospital
at a very formative age.
And I feel abandoned, right? So I implant this story of abandonment in my mind. In her mind, the story is, I love this child so much. I want him to be safe. And both those stories are existing concurrently. And
both are true.
And
your point about curiosity is such a valuable one, which is, as opposed to you did this to me.
Right.
Can you tell me why you chose to do that?
Yeah.
Not to me.
Yeah.
Like, why did you do that?
Yeah.
Honey, I love you so desperately. It was the most excruciating thing I've ever done in my life. You think I want to have a hospital take you away from me? Of course I didn't. But I thought it was the only way to help you. And to hear the other side.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I think that like we look at our culture, right? And if we're curious enough about how the stories that people inherited or have told throughout their lives based on the circumstances of their upbringing and their environment, there's deep humanity and compassion there. We don't have to agree with the beliefs that they've arrived at.
Yeah.
But by being curious about their stories, we invite them into dialogue, and it makes us all human. And so in that, you start to you can form bridges between people that have profoundly polar ideas. But in that conversation, we can find each other.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I think, like, I've thought a lot about purpose, because I think people confuse it. We touched on it earlier.
With accomplishment.
People confuse purpose with doing. And purpose is something so much more elemental.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the way I would define my purpose is simply that my purpose is to connect people with a more authentic understanding of themselves. And in doing so, when we come into confrontation with our own paradoxes, our own contradictions, our own hypocrisies, our own messiness, and we start to extend some level of compassion to ourselves, we're almost necessarily forced into the understanding that everybody comes with those same complications. And when we arrive at that point, we're then thrust into compassion by way of empathy. And so if you were to boil purpose down to a single word, for me, it would be compassion. I do that through storytelling.
You live a very balanced life.
Kinda.
No, I don't mean that glibly. Like, I think of it like entrepreneurial experience versus like a corporate experience, right? Which is, you know, if you live a corporate life, your lows are not going to be that low, but your highs are not going to be that high. It's very balanced. There's nothing wrong with it. It's good. If you choose an entrepreneurial path, your highs are so high, but my God, your lows are so low. But my point is nature abhors imbalance, nature abhors a vacuum. It'll always seek equilibrium.
Yeah.
And so it's going to find balance.
Yeah.
And so if you want to climb Mount Everest, literally, there is nowhere higher you can go.
Yeah.
Then you have to accept that the balance of that is go to a place where there's probably nowhere lower you can go.
Right.
You know? And so you live a very balanced life.
I like that. Yeah.
And it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just an is thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens in the extremes is the lessons are louder.
Yeah.
The lessons are available
throughout the spectrum.
But when you go out to the edges, the lessons are shouted at you rather than explained to you.
Yeah. That's great. That's awesome. Yeah. It's so true.
Beaten into you, you know, as opposed to like sitting down and studying for the test.
Oh yeah, I can read through the lines. I can see there. Okay, yeah.
Have you not learned this yet? You know.
so often it's like, no, I haven't.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go again. You know, like serve up another.
And I think as a result, your embodiment of those lessons, your clarity of those lessons, your 4 things, I think, are absolutely brilliant. And I will be writing them down at the end of this and keeping them.
And writing a book about it?
No. Keeping them on a card next to me.
Yeah.
Because I think they are so profoundly right.
Yeah.
And I think the value people like you offer people like us, whether you did it by choice or by accident, to live your life at the top of Everest and just one level above hell.
Yeah.
You know? Because it's not bottom, but it's pretty close to it. Or one step before the end.
Yeah.
I mean, is probably more accurate.
Yeah.
Because the lessons are so loud and so exaggerated and so clear to you and for you, it gives us a clarity that most of us will never have. But the lessons are valuable to all of us. And we will go through trauma and we will go through difficulty and we will go through discomfort. Most people, not close to what you've gone through. And so the lessons are there. They're just fuzzier and harder to see.
Yeah.
Which is why we go through them over and over again and repeat the same mistakes over and over again, because it takes many times before we have an epiphany where we're like, oh shit. But because it's so loud, we can hear yours and say thank you.
Wow.
You know?
I really appreciate that, because even still, there's days, there's a lot of times where I'm like, I don't know if any of this really.
The selfishness.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what the selfishness is. If there's a selfishness that goes with your life, it's your choice not to share what you've learned, because it would be unbelievably selfish to keep it to yourself so that you can get over your shit.
Yeah.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. Good for you. Great job. Buddy.
Well done. You know, I'm so happy for you. But that would be selfish. And I think the service element is I learned this. Let me tell you about it.
It's so beautifully put.
And I believe that true purpose.
Yeah.
Like we all have our unique why and our purpose and all that, but the universal truth, the true purpose in life is the opportunity to serve those who serve others.
I have sort of like, I cannot agree more. There is a sort of a list of things that I try to do every day, right? That are sort of foundational to sort of health and well-being. And one of them is service. And that can be it's reframing our ideas around what service looks like, which is, it doesn't have to be volunteering at the homeless shelter, right? Like, that's great. But service can be, to your point earlier, calling a friend and listening without trying to change anything.
Your men's group who just holds space for you is service. Your friend who came and lay on you and
active service
and
huge.
Cried on top of you,
yeah,
is an act of extreme service.
Yeah,
you know, and she didn't try to fix you or change you or solve any problem that was going through your mind.
Mm-mm.
She simply did the most beautiful thing of make you feel not alone, and your willingness to come here and share things that most people would probably keep to themselves.
Yeah,
you know, and some of the things that you've shared, people would keep to themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
Shame, embarrassment, whatever
Totally.
the reason.
Yeah.
And the courage you have to share the lessons is the most selfless thing I think you can ever do.
And the paradox is I had to go do all the things to get it, all the selfish things.
I mean...
Or I didn't have to.
No, you chose to.
I chose to.
You chose to for good reason.
Yeah. And I look back now and I go, wow, you know, the shift in my mind, first and foremost, the realization that we talked briefly hit on, is like, I don't think failure really exists.
So yeah, say more about that.
Well, just like, you
said in the history of the world, there's never been a failure.
In the history of the universe, there's never been a failure.
So,
there's been transitions. There's been change. A company doesn't fail. A company ceases to be profitable or viable in whatever market or economy they're in. All of the learning from the building of that business and the disintegration of that business simply splinters into new building and disintegration. It is literally the Ouroboros. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's life eating itself. It's the snake eating its tail. The buy-in to this is
or it's the thing that dies and disintegrates and then gives life, and then that dies and disintegrates and gives life, and it's the circle of life stuff.
It's the circle of life. So there is not, and once people say, well, that's a semantic argument, and I don't agree. It's a consciousness shift. You can't fail.
I mean, I think I don't think it's a semantic argument. I think it's finite and infinite games.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's, as you said, it's not the end, it's the transition.
And the transition is deeply uncomfortable.
It's not the end of the relationship. It's the transition into something different.
Into a new understanding.
And better or worse is, you know, who knows?
Well, better and worse, again, that's so interesting. Like,
but I mean, I'm saying I'm not.
Yeah.
They're all temporary states anyway.
Well, and they're value applications and they're stories, right? So there are no good or bad decisions. There are decisions and results. And then depending on the level of comfort that we have in the result, we apply the label or the story good or bad.
And both are temporary.
They're
like, I love when people say, you know, we're the number one, blah, blah, blah. And I always say, for now.
For now.
You know, it's like, I'm happy for now.
Yeah.
I'm sad for now.
The point is not to escape pain.
No.
What would life be without pain?
But I think that, I mean, yours more extreme than mine, and ours more extreme or less extreme than others, you know, which is the experiences that I had that led me to start with Why, for example. I never want to go through those things ever again, but I'm glad they happened. And I'm sure, like, the experiences that you've shared today, and I know there's others, I don't think you want to relive any of them.
No.
But are you glad they happened?
I love my brother so much. And I remember when I woke up, it was a day. Like, I remember waking up and going, oh my God, he's my greatest guide. The biggest gift I've ever been given in my entire life is that relationship, that man. In my heart, lay down at his feet and thank him every day. Because had the tapestry of our relationship not been so knotted and intertwined in the way that it was, I wouldn't be the person that I am. And so it's extending that gratitude to all the circumstances of life and being able to see it in its totality and settle into the fact that it's making you who you are, and that is an ever-changing, ever-evolving process that frees you from the bondage of blame and victimhood and prolonged suffering.
I could talk to you for hours. Cory, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. This was
I appreciate it.
Awesome. Really, really great.
I have no desire to climb Mount Everest. I'd like to go to base camp and just sit and look at the beautiful mountain.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
Let's go. Let's walk to Kalapatari. In fact, you don't even need to go to base camp. Kala Patthar is this area where you go up and there's a view. It's the classic view where you get of the three mountains. If you go to base camp, it's dirty, it's crowded, people are sick, and you can't even see Everest.
So then I'll go to wherever you said.
Kala Patthar.
All right. I've always wanted to go to Kala Patthar.
Yeah. We'll listen to some yak bells and spin some prayer wheels and drink tea.
That sounds good.
Yeah, it's great. It's perfect.
And I can get a sponsorship.
Yeah, we can get who wants to sponsor us right now?
Sponsorship to go to the bottom of the mountain.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see your high performance clothing do with the bottom.
We can raise some money for cancer research along the way. Yeah,
perfect. Yeah. And inspire children all over the world.
Inspire children all over the world. It'll be fabulous. I love it.
If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you'd like even more optimism, check out my website, simonsinek.com, for classes, videos, and more. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other. A Bit of Optimism is a production of The Optimism Company. It's produced and edited by Lindsay Garbenius, David Jha, and Devin Johnson. Our executive producers are Henrietta Conrad and Greg Rudershan.